I had a friend come visit me who, I will just say, worked for one of the alphabet agencies. And he came to our house, and when my wife was out of the room, he took me aside and he said, "Hey, by the way, do you know that your phone is tapped?" And I thought, "What do you mean?" He said, "Yeah, no, there's 5 or 6 different wiretaps on this. I can tell. This is what I do."
Think about that. Somebody's telling you your phone is tapped. We haven't even shot anything. We're not on the air. It's curious about the selection of those 4 words. We are watching you. It's not like I'm watching you. It's we, which raises a lot of questions. Who is this we? Who would that be? I'm Bryce Zabel. Have you ever wondered if there's a secret connection between Hollywood and UFOs?
And I'm Brent Friedman. You are listening to Sound, Light, and Frequency.
While preparing for this podcast, I've been going through all my old files, and I've found something.
And what we have learned is that paranoia strikes deep for a very good reason.
The thing about doing this podcast, Sound, Light, and Frequency, is that we've relied a lot on using our old files and so forth to try to tell the story of what happened during Dark Skies from 95 to 97. Anybody who's worked a long time in Hollywood certainly knows that you collect stuff. You collect scripts, you collect transcripts, show cuts, edits, everything. Fan mail, photos. You name it, you've got it. I've got boxes and boxes of it, and I'm going through it and have been going through it since we started.
I cannot compete with you, Bryce. You probably have exponentially more stuff than I have in terms of what you've collected. I started practicing letting go about 5 years ago, which has been very liberating. Unfortunately, like I said, I probably have much less than you with regards to even Dark Skies memorabilia.
I wish you hadn't let go of so many things, because there's gold in them there file boxes, Brent. And I'll tell you something, one of them was, I don't know if you let go of it. I cannot imagine you would have let go of your magic badge. No. But you said you did. Did you let go of it?
That was not a letting go. That was just a losing. That was just a plain old incompetence. I had that for a long time. It used to be like hung up on something in my office as just a reminder of how fun those days were. And then it went missing, like a number of things in my life, and I've never found it. I should probably pay my daughter $500 to go look for it. But honestly, I cannot find it anywhere, and it's very upsetting because that was the one memento from that party that I would love to wear proudly.
And by magic badge, we mean MAJIC as in majestic, MJ, magic 12, that kind of thing, not magic, MAGIC. We gave a badge, as we've said before, to everybody at our Dark Skies premiere party back in 96. And the only guy that didn't have one was JC. Except I also found out that I had misplaced mine. It was driving me nuts. So I started going through more boxes, and Brent, I have an announcement to make.
Oh, no. Now I feel even
I have my magic badge.
That.
Yep.
Now,
and
you
for
also,
those of you who, you describe it for those of people who are listening to us instead of watching this.
I think let's start with the headline, which is mullet. And
yeah, that is the headline. I had an unfortunate, my kids have never stopped teasing me about that, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, you look like an operative. You look like you could have worked for Majestic in the day in that photo. No, but it's super cool. It actually looks like it could have been authentic, which I think is the highest compliment.
I wish we could remember who exactly designed it, because it's cool.
It was somebody in the art department, I'm sure.
Yeah, and they did a great little job. And here's the thing. On the back side, it's literally got a thumbprint, which would have been the way to ID yourself back in the 60s when we were saying our series took place. Although that is not my thumbprint, it's just a generic. I'm sure it's on everybody's magic badge, including yours. Anyway, these things were cool. I'm glad to have it back. I actually have a digital copy of yours, so our show today will actually have you and me, side by side, brought together again, Butch and Sundance at the Magic Corral. So that'll be good.
Okay.
The thing is, we have found something else. It's some physical evidence, if you will, or at least suggestive of evidence while getting ready to do this podcast. And we want to bring it to everyone's attention. The thing is, we want to do a short amount of setting the time frame for everybody, because when we show you what we have found, it's important to know when it came out and what it was surrounded by. Just to get that party started, everyone by now, Brent, knows about the Dark Skies party, but that was September of 1996, okay? Mm-hmm. But we need to roll back to 94 is when you and I met and started talking about Dark Skies. But the first real year that we need to say belonged to that show is 1995, and it started in January, on literally January 2nd, with the Lone Guard letter, which we talked about in a previous episode. Mm-hmm. And things picked up in intensity. I'm sure you remember all of that, but after the Lone Guard letter, we started doing those notebooks for real. And yes, the Lone Guard letter was in it, so was all that other stuff. We started building notebooks. And as you said, we went to Kinko's all the time. That was fun. The script, we had included in that notebook an outline of a 2-hour pilot, but we had not written it. We were in March talking about picking up Dark Skies to various production companies. And the one we settled on was Columbia TV in March. And we instantly had them order a script from us. So we were working in March and May on the Dark Skies 2-hour pilot. I bet you remember those days.
I do. And I want to give a nod to our patron saint at Sony, Jeff Sagansky, who I remember he apparently bought the show as he stepped off the Concorde in Paris, he having just read the entire briefing book on the flight across the Atlantic. If it weren't for him, we wouldn't be telling these stories. And so, again, a nod to Jeff Sagansky, was central to getting this thing off the ground.
I love hearing that story, and I actually found some notes recently about that time, and it talks about how Jeff was very impressed by the notebook. I think he loved a lot about it, but the notebook, he just thought, because Jeff is a pretty good marketer, and I think he saw the same potential in it that we saw. So anyway, May happens, the script gets written. That's where things get interesting. The script actually got turned in to Columbia TV on my birthday, which is May 17th. And that's why I remember it so well, which allowed me to turn it in and then go away for the weekend, which is a lovely thing to do, to have nothing on your plate for an entire weekend. That was great. Then things got interesting because we started doing notes on it. Jeff ordered more notebooks because we were going to get ready to go pitch this. So at first, we'd only made a certain small smattering of notebooks, these classified briefing notebooks. And then we got serious. We were doing notebooks by the dozen, and we were, oh man, those were the days.
Yeah, no, it was a full production that we went into in terms of producing those notebooks. And I don't remember, I think we made 10 or 12 of them, or maybe even 20. I don't remember, but it was a huge undertaking. It was a lot of fun to produce all of those. But I think the main thing that I take away is that we were so steeped in Dark Skies at that time. Everything was Dark Skies, like 24/7, right, except for that one weekend you took off, because we were getting the show off the ground. This was a dream come true. And as we talked about before with the Lone Guard letter, we were selling this show. And you said Jeff Sagansky was a showman. We had some showmanship in terms of all of the marketing, the collateral marketing that we put together to get this show off the ground, which is interesting in terms of where it all leads with the story you're about to tell.
My favorite memory of putting all those notebooks together for Columbia TV was that they were paying for them for a change. The first ones, we had to go shell out of our own pocket, and every one had a certain cost to it. I don't remember what the unit cost was, but it wasn't small. And so it was nice that they did it. Anyway, those notebooks got made in June, because the first week of July of 95 is when we went out and pitched this to 3 different networks in the same day, got offers from CBS and NBC, and decided to go with NBC. So sometime in July, NBC is getting involved in our life. And here's where the rubber meets the road on this story. NBC picks it up and says, listen, we need to see this pilot. We're putting your pilot into production. So suddenly, you and I are in pre-production for this 2-hour pilot that, although it wasn't written on spec, it wasn't written for the network. It was written for Sagansky and his executive team at Columbia TV. And I'm sure there were some bruised feelings at some network level by people that said, wait a minute, we don't even get to develop this thing, you just bought it. But that's what happened. So this thing goes into pre-production. At the same time that it's going into pre-production, though, NBC had ordered 6 backup scripts. And to explain what that means is just NBC wanted to make sure that if they shot this pilot, we had a plan for where we were going. But more than that, they didn't want to look at just some little document you and I put together that said, this is our plan for the series. They wanted to read scripts. So we had 2 things going on at the same time in July, which was prepare for pre-production, which would start soon, and also get these scripts done. And the reason we were preparing for pre-production is, as it turns out, we started shooting the Dark Skies 2-hour pilot on November 8th of 1995. So that was looming as a deadline. Okay. All right, we're here. What I'm about to show you folks is something that, it's not like Brent and I forgot about it, but we saw this when it happened, had definite feelings about it, and then got involved in producing Dark Skies. And to complete that metaphor, what then ended up happening is that it got put in one of my boxes and filed away with everything else. And then life went on, right? I had 3 kids, and I had other shows that I was working on afterwards, as did you. And memory being what it was, these things fell out of my mind. And then they fell back in recently, quite recently, while working on Sound, Light, and Frequency. Here's what happened. It's August, and we're in the middle of all of this. And I go to my mailbox one day, and people actually got mail back then. I don't know how many people are actually getting mail.
I vaguely remember.
Mail. Do you get mail anymore?
I get junk mail. I get lots of junk mail.
I get junk mail. I get bills. But back then, sometimes you could get something that was worth reading. Sometimes somebody would send you a letter or something. So it's still worth going to the mailbox. I went to the mailbox that day, and I got a postcard. This is the postcard, all right? As you look at this thing, you see it's got a book cover on it. The book is actually called The Flying Eyes. It was published in 1962 by the author J. Hunter Hawley, and it basically is it's Flying Eyes, okay?
Yeah.
It's Flying Eyes. It's strange. It caught my attention.
Yeah,
but
it's an alien invasion with flying eyes, essentially.
Right, which, as I understand it, I have not read it, but these levitating eyes could hypnotize people en masse, and they were bizarrely resilient. You could shoot them, as I understand it, and they would reconstitute themselves. But basically, it's a surveillance thing. These eyes basically are looking down on people from the sky. Now, if that sounds familiar to the UFO issue, congratulations, we'll send you a prize. What happened, though, is I read the back of it, and I was shocked because there were 4 words, and they are not written across like a normal sentence. They are stacked. They are stacked, one word, another word. And they're all typed in courier font. They're all capitalized, and it's obviously clear that a very full ribbon has been used. And they shocked me. They freaked me out, and this is what they said. We are watching you. Bring back some memories?
It does. Not good memories either. Although I will say that there was the initial, this is just a joke, right? And I think you assumed I did it. I don't think I actually thought you had done it to yourself.
That's a double backflip of reality even I can't pull off. Yeah.
So I think once we got past the, did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it? And it was clear that neither one of us did it to each other, then the creepiness started settling in. Because, of course, let's not forget, you gave a great set the table of context of what was going on at the time, but even go back a little bit further, we were doing a show in which I had taken information given to me by John Harrington, the man in the Reagan administration who disclosed to me, and we had woven some of those ideas into our show. And so for someone to be watching us sent a shiver down my spine, and this was even before JC.
My spine didn't get completely shivered until we talked. I got this, and I thought, this is quite odd. And I thought it was odd enough that my wife reminds me she didn't learn about these things till much later, right? I must have been somewhat freaked out a little bit by the postcard that I didn't show it to her. I did take it to the office right away. And this postcard, by the way, is August 19th. 1995. I took it to the office and showed it to you, and you're correct. My first take that I wanted to rule out was that somehow, because of our notebooks and the whole idea of surveillance and us being in the middle of it, that you had just found this postcard and thought, this will be a fun thing. I'll pull one over on Bryce. So I showed it to you, and it was very clear that you had not done that. Not only did you say you hadn't done it, but you were clearly surprised enough by it that you were thinking, this is not good. This is very strange. And I want to just remind the audience, this is August of 95, which is 13 entire months before that Dark Skies premiere party, when the actual show would air on NBC and JC would come to my house and offer us a cooperation deal with the Office of Naval Intelligence. So this was something that was troubling. I thought it was very troubling because, first of all, somebody had gone to the trouble to find a postcard that is literally eyes in the sky watching you, and then they'd boiled it down to the basic surveillance motif. We are watching you. It's troubling.
Yeah, it is. Once we got past the obvious, it raised the question of who could have sent this. And that's a whole rabbit hole we can go down, and we will. But I want to just rewind because I was already on edge, as I said, by doing Dark Skies in the first place. So when this happened, it took all of my paranoia up a notch. And adding more fuel to that flame, right around this same time, I remember that I had a friend come visit me who, I will just say, worked for one of the alphabet agencies. And he came to our house, and when my wife was out of the room, he took me aside and he said, "Hey, by the way, do you know that your phone is tapped?" And I thought, "What do you mean?" He said, "Yeah, no, there's 5 or 6 different wiretaps on this. I can tell. This is what I do." And I thought, I don't understand. Why would my phone be tapped? He goes, "When you put a show like Dark Skies on the air, there's probably people want to know what you're talking about behind the scenes." And I'm like, "Can you get rid of it?" And he goes, "This is way above my pay grade." So I had this whole other layer now where you're getting postcards talking to both of us that we're being surveilled or watched with a flying eyes message on there that's not too subtle. And meanwhile, I'm finding out that my phone is tapped at home. And I think the title we used, or we were going to use for one of our scripts, was Paranoia Strikes Deep. And that was from the exit music for our pilot, the Buffalo Springfield song, For What It's Worth. That was one of the lines. And I got to tell you, at this time, paranoia had struck deep in me. And I was really worried. And like you said, we hadn't even shot the pilot yet. And I was already on edge.
Think about that. Somebody's telling you your phone is tapped. We haven't even shot anything. We're not on the air. It's curious about the selection of those 4 words. We are watching you. It's not like I'm watching you. It's we, which raises a lot of questions. Who is this we? Who would that be? Just a couple of things to unpack from what you just said. The phone tap kind of idea. No one ever told me my phone was tapped, but I remember you telling me that story. And all I remember was this. I had for a couple of months a feeling, well, here's the thing. When I was a kid growing up in the 60s, people had party lines, which meant that you shared a line with somebody else.
I've heard about
like you'd be
these.
having a call with somebody and you'd hear this technical click kind of thing, and you'd know that somebody on the other party line was listening to your phone call. And so people would have conversations like, "Hey, I'm on the phone here." And the party line person would say, "Yeah, but I got to make a phone call. It's important. I have to call my doctor." And you'd say, "I'm wrapping up. Give me 5 minutes." You'd have conversations with people you did not know, right? It's so strange to say that to anybody today, but party lines were a thing. Anyway, you did hear clicks and things because of that. And then for many years, I never heard anything like that. But when we started doing Dark Skies, I did hear these sort of technical things. And I hadn't thought too much of it. I thought we got a shitty phone line, to be honest. That was my first thing, I thought, because that happened. You'd have marginal phone service and that would happen. But when you told me that, I thought, that's interesting because I've heard 2 or 3 different sounds. They weren't always the same sound.
No, they were. It sounded like, ironically, like some of the clicking sounds that you hear in the Disclosure Day trailer. It was like little popping and clicking. And I guess that was people tapping in and out of the line.
Yeah, it's nuts. Okay, listen.
Yeah.
What I want to say further to everyone is to stay with us, because there was a second postcard, and it came 4 days later. But I don't want to talk about that postcard just yet, because in preparing for this show, we've done a little background research. And one of the things that we realized, and I'm holding up a book right now for those of you listening, it's from Stanton Friedman as the author, and it's called Top Secret Magic, again, MAJIC. And this book came out in, I believe, 97, and actually I optioned it. This was after Dark Skies. I optioned it because I thought maybe I can turn this into a movie or something. In reading through it, though, Stanton tells a story in this book, and again, this came out after our postcards, even though it had been... Yeah.
I just want to interrupt for a second, because, first of all, you were friends with Stanton Friedman, but for those who don't know who Stanton Friedman is, he was someone pretty important in ufology.
Stanton Friedman was the wizard of ufology. He was a nuclear physicist who basically quit his job in the late 50s, and then became the voice of UFO research in the 60s. Fascinating guy, really walked the walk. The guy was a tremendous researcher and gave his life and abilities to it. But one of the things that I realized in there, and by the way, if any of you own this book, it's on page 89 in both the hardcover and the softcover, which I don't know how that happened, but that's the truth. Stanton had been working with two other UFO researchers in the late 80s, and they were Jaime Shandera and Bill Moore. And Shandera had received a roll of undeveloped film in the mail, and they had developed the film, and the film was a document. And that document informed not only ufology for a while and became incredibly controversial, but it was something you and I embraced for Dark Skies. And it was basically what we now have come to know, the Eisenhower briefing document. And that is a document that was supposedly created on November 18th, 1952, for Dwight Eisenhower, who had just been elected president, who was getting briefed before he would take office early the next year. And it basically said Roswell was real, that we had bodies, there were other crashes. It's a profound document. And one of the things in it is that it also said that there was a memo called the Cutler-Twining memo that said MJ-12 was real, because it basically is a memo from Ike's chief of staff asking for a meeting for something called MJ-12. After they developed this film and saw the Majestic 12 documents, it's pretty fascinating, Brent, and it's laid out in Stan's book. They claimed they had received some postcards in the mail, and that these postcards had some specific information on them. One of the things that they did is they talked about Suitland, they talked about Reese's Pieces, and they talked about Box 189. And they were mailed from, I believe, Ethiopia, or that's right, where they said they were from. Here's the thing. Reese's Pieces refers to a guy named Ed Reese, who ran the National Archives. And Suitland refers to Suitland, Maryland, which is where the archives were located. And when Shandera and Moore went to those archives and spent days going through stuff, they literally ended up in Box 189, where they found that Cutler-Twining memo from 1954 from Ike. And it was just in the middle of the files. So I guess what I'm saying is there is precedent for what you and I went through, that somebody was using postcards. Now, it might have been disinformation. It might have been just somebody trying to have fun with UFO researchers. That's possible, and we can get into more of that later, but it was pretty real to them at the time.
I have two thoughts on this. The first is I'm jealous. They get a postcards that sounds like it's an alternate reality game or an escape room. They get to go on a treasure hunt and find something cool. We just get a threat. If I could do it all over again, I'd prefer the fun game that we can go on our treasure hunt. Secondarily, if I'm not mistaken, William Moore had quite a interesting presence in ufology. And so I'm curious on your opinion of that. Maybe you can give us a little background on him, but also, does that undercut or undermine the credibility of this Twining memo?
Fascinating. First of all, Twining is invoked twice in ufology. In 1947, Nathan Twining, who was Lieutenant General Nathan Twining of the Army Air Forces, had written a memo that he was told to write. This is a real memo. This one is not it was released under Freedom of Information Act. It's the real thing. The government admits it's real. It's a memo from Nathan Twining where he stated that the objects seen by military personnel were not weather, astronomical, or other phenomenon, but rather objects that warranted further investigation. And this is the memo people might have heard about. In that memo, it says, quote, "The phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious." That's about as clean a statement the U.S. government has ever made on the top of UFOs. It's amazing. And again, that is the Twining memo. Now, the Cutler-Twining memo is the one that showed up in the Majestic 12 documents. And that was the one that was used to say MJ-12 is real because here's a memo from Ike and all that. But of course, if you don't believe the Majestic 12 documents are real, then you might not believe that document is real. And I know this sounds arcane, but the date of the Twining memo where he said the phenomenon is real is September 23, 1947. But what's pretty interesting is that the Eisenhower briefing document, the memo it has, the Truman-Forrestal memo inside that briefing document, is dated September 24th, 1947, the day after the so-called Twining memo. And in that one, it says, quote, "As per our recent conversation on the matter, you are hereby authorized," and by the way, this is from Harry Truman, "you are hereby authorized to proceed with all due speed and caution upon your undertaking. Hereafter, this matter shall be referred to only as Operation Majestic 12. Wow. So let me put it this way. If that memo is fake, as many people try to allege, then at least whoever wrote it and put it inside the Eisenhower briefing memo knew about the Twining memo and managed to put these dates together. So the whole thing is this arcane but fascinating thing, and somehow we're in the middle of that thing. That freaks me out too.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this concept that this was a form of communication between the people in the shadows and people like you and I out trying to make a TV show or investigate something. You're getting postcards in the mail from somewhere out in the world, in this case, Ethiopia. Even looking back on ours, we got ours from Santa Clarita, which was way outside of LA, but it was very close to the area we ended up shooting later, our crop circle sequence. We didn't know anyone that lived out in Santa Clarita, and I'm sure these two gentlemen didn't know anyone in Ethiopia. You get something in the mail from an unknown source, and in their case, it led to, supposedly, a document that became foundational in ufology. And for us, again, it was a threat. It was, or at least a vague threat, and I have to believe that in both cases, these were done intentionally. The question, as comes up a lot, was it done to help us, to lead us down a path, to send us a signal, or was it done to disinform us, to throw us off the scent? That's the most frustrating thing, is that we can't discern the intention here.
I want to talk more about that, but let's take a little sidebar, because one of the things you mentioned, Brent, was that paranoia strikes deep, which is a line from the song For What It's Worth, written by Buffalo Springfield and performed by Buffalo Springfield. And that's the one where it says, "There's a man with a gun over there telling me I gotta beware. Paranoia strikes deep, into your heart it will creep." And we loved that song. We did, in fact, use it in our Dark Skies pilot. And in fact, one of those backup scripts that you and I were writing was called Paranoia Strikes Deep. And we did, in fact, write that script, and it never got shot. It's the lost episode of Dark Skies, along with some of those others that other writers had done as well. But Paranoia Strikes Deep reminds me of a movie that I have seen recently, and you just saw recently. I think we should take a little detour.
Yeah, let's do that, because I think this movie is a great example of how you can tell a really compelling UAP alien story without a big budget and big special effects. And it captured that sense of kind of escalating paranoia incredibly well, which makes it very relevant to the discussion we're having.
Listen, the movie we're talking about, of course, is The Vast of Night. Okay, it was released in 2019. I think it came out and was winning awards.
Yeah, it was produced in 2019. I think it was in a few film festivals, but then it premiered on Amazon in 2020.
And I remember seeing it. That was during the lockdown. the COVID lockdown. And at the time, my daughter and her best friend were living at our house. And so we all watched it together. And my daughter's friend said, that's the best film I've ever seen. But I'll tell you what's interesting about it. We always try to do the log line. The log line for Vast of Night is, just to complete what it is, it's a micro budget. It's a kind of inventive UFO mystery, and it takes place in one night in 1950s New Mexico in a small town. And it's really two main characters, a switchboard operator and a radio DJ, who are chasing down a mysterious audio frequency that's happening when strange lights are in town. And if anybody has missed that, that would be sound, an audio recording that has shown up, and light, strange dancing lights on the edge of town, and frequency, because it's coming out over a radio transmission. I don't know. Maybe that's why I liked it so much. Maybe I knew we were going to do this podcast a good 6 years ago, Brent, and now I'm finally catching up to that. Maybe we were influenced.
We have so far focused on some of the big formative movies in science fiction with regards to UAP and aliens. We've done a lot of big movies, but I think this is one of the things we also wanted to do was there's going to be certain movies that are out there like this one, which I highly recommend, that just evaded everyone's radar. I had never heard of it before until Bryce brought it up for me. And this is the kind of thing that we'd also like the show to do, is encourage you to go back and watch this. We've talked about some movies on the show that I wouldn't encourage that. This one I would. The thing I found fascinating when I dug into it a little bit is that it's loosely based on two actual events from history. One of them was the Kecksburg UFO incident, which happened in Pennsylvania in 1965. What happened was a bunch of citizens and even some pilots at the time reported this huge fireball going across the sky. And people saw it hit somewhere in the vicinity, and apparently it was dropping like a bunch of hot metal debris as it went across the sky. And then where it hit, that whole area was immediately sealed off by Army and state police. Now, ultimately, the official explanation was it was a meteor. That was what the news tried to push out there. But then NASA came forward later and claimed that it was a Soviet satellite. However, interestingly, in 1987, a few years later, NASA claimed, all the evidence for that Soviet satellite, that's been lost. As the kids like to say, very sus.
Very sus.
That incident, interestingly, has been nicknamed Pennsylvania's Roswell.
And that one is unsolved to this day.
Correct.
And based on witnesses, it probably was solved. Listen, first of all, I like this movie. It may not be for everybody. It's interesting. The critics love this movie, but people that watch it are a little more at sea about it. Some of them think it's too slow or whatever. And the reason they think it's too slow is that the director, who I'm looking for his name here, yes, Andrew Patterson, who did a really nice job with it. But the director has chosen to go with these extremely long scenes. And there's many of them. I think there's like half the number of cuts in this film that would be in a normal film, as I understand it. But what I love about it is that there are two scenes where someone just basically talks, and it's creepy and interesting, and I just recommend it. And here's the thing. The guy's running a radio broadcast, and everyone's at the basketball game that night, so he's all alone, and he's taking calls, and people are reporting these dancing lights and things in the sky, and he's asking for information. And a guy named Billy calls in, and Billy says he has served in the military. He was taken to a secret desert site where personnel built a large underground structure to house a mysterious object. And they were told if they talked about it, it would endanger America. Now, this is a long scene, and it's so great, but the idea of the mystery building, that sounds like the one that's rumored that Coulthard first started talking about a couple of years ago, which I don't think I'm violating anybody's suspicions to say that people talk about it being in South Korea. Nobody has confirmed that or anything. That's just what people say on the internet. In any case, what I really found fascinating about this guy and this story is that he says a couple of things. He says it was bigger than an airplane, but no one was allowed to see it, which again fits in with that large thing that Coulthard was talking about. He said they had to dig a hole to put this enormous thing in it, and it was covered with a tarp. And it's just so creepy the way he talks about it. And he said that he was picked to do it because he was black, and people that were on the crew were largely black and Mexican, to make sure that their testimony wouldn't be taken as seriously, which frankly sounds realistic.
For that era, yeah.
For sure. And then there's this second interview where that's when they're on the air, the first one. The second one, they go to somebody's house. A woman has called in and said, I know all about this, come over. And they come over to this woman's house. Her name is Mabel. And she says, basically, they've come here before. And she calls them the people in the sky. And she says, they took my son and no one has ever believed me. So the whole thing is about mystery, but it doesn't really draw a roadmap.
Yeah.
And I guess the reason I'm comparing it to this postcard thing is it was something that you could relate to. They had a sort of a sound. We had this postcard, and it, instead of answering questions, it raises questions. At least that's how it hit me.
Yeah, I had all the same feels. What I loved about it was this idea that it took a little bit of contact, which was this idea of the whole inciting incident being this mysterious sound that they're hearing, that people are hearing. And then it combined it with Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So two of my favorite movies in this space. And the way it brought in the Close Encounters thing was this sound was something that it manipulated them. They became obsessed about it. And that part of what the theory was is that you were trying to follow the source of this sound, and it led people away from the town out into isolation where they could be abducted. So that's a really fascinating idea. And it connects back for me and how Richard Dreyfuss and the other characters in Close Encounters got this image in their head of the Devil's Tower, and they became obsessed with it, and they followed the trail of that all the way to this encounter with the Close Encounter of the Third Kind. So combining those two elements in a really original way with a micro budget. By the way, yes, it's a micro budget, but it looks good. It's stylish. It does not look like a cheap film. It's just, there's a lot of long takes to save money.
Long takes, and people that like things to be very well lit will probably be disappointed because a lot of it is not that well lit. But that's part of its charm and mystery and all that. Anyway, it's a good film, but the reason I bring it up is if you see The Vast of Night, then you will understand what we mean when we say paranoia strikes deep, because it gets inside you and you go, I'm disturbed by this. That is exactly what you and I both felt when we saw the postcards, or at least I'm speaking for myself at this point, but I'm thinking you must have felt something similar to that.
I felt the exact same things. And I think it's time to now visit the second postcard.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. I just wrote a note to myself that says second postcard. So here we go. All right. We told you about postcard number 1, The Flying Eyes, where, again, it says, we are watching you. All right. That happened on August 19th, 1995. And you and I pretty well thought, okay, somebody has sent us a message. That's disconcerting. The show must go on. At least I think that is what we were doing, because we didn't have time to sit around and think to ourselves, should we look into this? Let's hire a private eye. Let's do, there's no internet to search on it. We couldn't even get the books at that time, right? Maybe you would have got the books, but it didn't really look like they were sending a message with the book cover. It just felt like somebody found a target of opportunity, bought this postcard, typed in this message. Who they were, we don't know. Okay. That was where we were until 4 days later on August 23rd, 1995, when we received this postcard, which is Operation Interstellar. And it is, it's written by George O. Smith. Listen, I don't know exactly the whole thing about what it's about. I haven't read it, but it's something about a main character who believes that real-time communication across interstellar distances is impossible. No, that's the theory that people are saying. But the main character is a guy named Paul Grayson, who believes in a technology that can have instant communications across space-time. So it is an interesting little secret, if true. People talk about that right now. But that's not what got weird about this one for us, because at that point it was just a book cover. All right. The back of it is in the same typeface. So it looks like a courier. It's in all caps. And honestly, I could send it out to be looked at, but it's pretty clear to me it's either a matching typewriter or the same typewriter. And it's not with a very dark ribbon like the first one. It's a little lighter ribbon, which I guess if you were typing a lot, 4 days later, you might see it. So this is August 23rd. And here it comes. This one again is stacked, but it's more than 4 words, so it's got phrases that are stacked. But it says, "We admire you and are very impressed by your work. We even take pride in your accomplishments." There it goes. You can see that there. Now, one of these is a threat, but the other seems to be something entirely different. It's the push-pull.
It's the good cop, bad cop, yeah.
Yeah. I don't have any good theories on that other than maybe somebody sent "We are watching you," and somebody in charge of that person said, "That's a ridiculous, don't freak these guys out. Tell them that we like them," or something. That could have happened. Right. But that second one, 4 days later, I should point out before we get into any analysis of it, is that we never got another one. To the best of my knowledge, I've never seen another one. I never got another one. You never got another one. But again, I point out, August 23rd, Brent, is exactly 1 month and 1 year until JC shows up at our house. And I was just wondering, did you ever think in retrospect? You know, at the time, we only had our one reaction. Right. But now we have a reaction from 30 years later. Are you thinking JC?
Yeah. So before I give you my present day theory, my thought at the time was that it was a friend. That it wasn't you and I didn't do it. Then it had to be someone in our inner circle who was doing it as a prank. As you said, maybe their conscience was what changed them. Maybe they were close enough to us at the time that they saw that we were freaked out by the first postcard, that "We are watching you." And so they pulled back and they said, "Oh no, we admire you. We're proud of your accomplishments." So that was part of my thinking at the time. But again, as you said, we didn't have JC as a suspect at that moment. So I think we just wrote it off as somebody in our inner circle was messing with us. Post JC coming into your backyard and making us a deal, any paranoia that we had about the postcards was now living and breathing. It wasn't just a postcard, it was a person. And it's, in my mind, it's hard to believe that wasn't JC sending those postcards, or at least the office that JC said he worked for, the Office of Naval Intelligence, because as we talked about, it wasn't "I'm watching you, I admire," it's "We are watching you, we admire." So you start to look at all of the circumstantial evidence. The message that JC came to us with is, "We've been watching you, we've read everything that you have written, and we like what you've done. You got a lot right." So it felt like those postcards were announcing his arrival before he even came. However, he said nothing about that when he talked to us. There was no, "Hey, did you get my postcards?" Or there was no kind of wink, wink reference to "We've been watching you." So if he did go to that trouble, why didn't he take credit for it? I can't answer that question. But to this moment, I still contend my number one suspect is JC.
It's a good theory. That's what we're left with, is theories here. But I have a couple of things that we have done to track things down and cast a wider net about what these things might have meant. It's very clear in looking at these 2 postcards with our 30 years experience now to look back at them in a different way. And one of the things you could say is the postcards fit the style of that MJ12 mystery postcard thing that happened to Shandera and Moore. Okay?
Yep.
But I fault Shandera and Moore. I have never seen the postcards they claimed were sent to them. So at least we're showing these postcards, and we're putting them on our website, which is soundlightfrequency.com, and we're putting them in this video, and we're talking about them openly. I wish they had, because then we would have the ability to say, wow, that's pretty similar to our postcard. As it is, we just have their word for it. Our postcards do fit that mystery postcard tradition. But what they don't do, that the Moore Shandera postcard, or postcards, they said there were multiples, they don't behave like the breadcrumb trail, right? They're not giving us little clues, as you pointed out, that you go, "Oh, great, now let's go investigate this." In fact, one of them is just saying, "We're watching you," and the other is saying, basically, "We think you're doing a good job." But it's like, it raises the question, who are you to tell us we're doing a good job? Right? I don't even know who you guys are. So there's that. The other thing that we've looked into is that postmark. The postmark is Santa Clarita. And just so people understand, even back in 1995, Santa Clarita was already a major high-volume filming zone in the LA area. It's where they had movie ranches and infrastructure, and there were a lot of people there. And I did a little bit of investigating. And it seems at that time of things that might have been shooting there, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was one of them. Star Trek Productions was, I think, doing some Voyager filming out there. I don't know what that proves or doesn't prove, because if I was somebody trying to put out disinformation, I might very well mail it to our contact who was observing the Hollywood community in Santa Clarita and have them mail it. I don't really know. I'm just saying Santa Clarita, the reason we suspected one of our people might have done it is because it was a filming community. And if I'm not mistaken, during the production of the Dark Skies pilot, you were out in that area. I didn't go to the crop circle shoot, but you did. And wasn't that near there?
That's right near Santa Clarita, yes. But for Santa Clarita to mean something, when someone sent a postcard in 95, we weren't shooting that crop circle sequence, I believe, until 96.
No,
how could they have known?
I think we did shoot that in 95 because it was in our pilot.
But we hadn't gotten the postcard yet, had we?
No, we had. Postcard comes out in August, and we shot Dark Skies starting November 8th in Washington, D.C. for 4 days. Okay. Then we came back in November of 95 and shot through December something like 18th. Right before Christmas, the week before Christmas. Okay. So you were out there in the immediate backwash of that postcard.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's just all these little coincidences start to add up and raise the question, was this just a random joke or a prank? Or was someone sending us a message or several messages?
Let's talk theories. It's easy for us to say it could have been JC. All right, but there are other theories, and we should at least put them on the board. Any rational look at these two postcards, you'd have to say, okay, it could have been a prank. And the fact that it wasn't you and it wasn't somebody on our production doesn't mean somebody else didn't prank us. Because as we've said, we made a bunch of these notebooks. They were out on the town. In the same way that when JC came to the Dark Skies party, the actual show itself had been put on tape and was passing around the town. People could have seen it that way. So somebody could have seen our notebook and said, I'm going to prank these guys. It could have been somebody from the UFO subculture, basically, and it was like cosplay or something, right? I'm going to pretend that I'm this deep intelligence insider. It could have just been somebody who was adjacent to the business. But then the other theories would have to be, it could have been what it looked like, somebody from the intelligence community. Yeah. Look, this one is the least likely, but it could have been the phenomenon people keep reporting is a jokester sometimes. So maybe that was a joke that the phenomenon thought they'd play on us.
Yeah. I think anytime we're getting into fans or cosplay or anything like that, we have to remember that the show hadn't come out yet and that the script wasn't available publicly. So it's hard to imagine that somebody just out in the general public knew enough about what we were doing that they could have pranked us. I will say, too, that the saving grace in all of this for me was that they came to your house and not mine. So I had the wiretaps. That was my burden.
Yeah, how come?
You had strange postcards coming to your place.
I'm getting postcards. I got guys crashing my party. Listen, here's how I would put it. I had my thoughts about this when it happened, and you and I shared those, and we didn't share them widely with other people because I think we didn't quite know what to make of it, and we didn't have a lot of time. People just need to understand, if you got 6 scripts to write at the same time that you're supposed to be producing a 2-hour film, you don't have a lot of time to mull things. You just have to accept them and move on. But here are my observations with 30 years. First, we created a fictional letter from our hero, John Lowengard, and then the mailbox acted like it had read it. That's the part that's so strange to me. And the first card really didn't leave room for interpretation. It wasn't hello. It was, we see you. So it wasn't, you didn't have to mull what exactly it was getting at. We see you. Don't think we're not aware of what you're up to. And the prank thing, Brent, I got to tell you, if that was a prank, then somebody showing up with an air horn at your house at 3 a.m. in the morning is just a prankster. Because that's how it felt to me. It just felt like, I'm not happy that whoever did this did it. And then I guess my ultimate conclusion is we were making a show about a shadow government, and then somebody out there mailed us a shadow.
Ooh, well said. Look, I think another thing to consider here is we're talking about this some 30 years later, and if it was a prank of any kind, no one ever came forward. No one ever got the satisfaction of saying, hey, I got you guys, I tricked you. And so I think as we come to the end of the episode, I want to use this moment, this platform, to say to anyone out there, whether you were a friend, whether you were part of the inner circle, an executive at the network or the studio, or part of the crew, maybe you were just a fan. Maybe you were, like Bryce said, a cosplayer, somebody that knew a little bit about what was going on in inside Hollywood and you wanted to punk us. Please come forward and claim this prank. Tell us that you sent the postcards, and if you can, prove it, because we would love to close this case. This is yet another enigma that's hanging over us. And this is one in which, as Bryce said, we didn't even remember that there was any significance to this until we decided to do the podcast. And now, so I'm starting to wonder, what else are we going to find that's going to dredge up all of these other memories and create another wave of paranoia?
Connections happen. I'll just close with this thought. 1 card is a threat. 2 cards is a relationship. Right? If they came from the same person, somebody was saying, we see you and you don't see us. And they're also saying, we approve of what you're doing, what were we doing? We were telling a story about the UFO cover-up, and we're proud of you for doing that. I didn't ask for anybody's pride, so I don't know about that. Listen, I'd love to keep chatting some more, but I got to go out and check my mail, and you know what? Maybe
good
that's
luck
not a
with
good
that.
idea. Maybe we should just hold off on that. Soundlight and Frequency is an iHeart podcast produced by Stellar Productions. It's executive produced by Nick Johnson, and for Stellar, Jackie Zabel. Our show's music was written by Anna Stumpf and Hamilton Lighthouser. And your hosts and executive producers are Bryce Zabel, that's me, and Brent Friedman. Watch the skies.